The sun was shining brightly over Willow Creek Mall, casting golden rays through the large glass skylights that lined the ceiling. The mall buzzed with life. Shoppers moved from store to store. Families laughed as they enjoyed ice cream cones, and kids squealed with excitement near the fountain in the center of the food court. It was a typical Saturday afternoon, filled with the usual hustle and bustle. Among the crowd was Detective Maya Richardson, a tall, confident woman with an air of quiet authority about her, though she carried herself like someone who commanded respect. Today she wasn't wearing her professional demeanor or uniform. She was simply Maya, off duty and taking a rare break from her demanding job. Maya had earned her position as a senior investigator at the U.S. Department of Justice, DOJ, through years of hard work, dedication, and unwavering commitment to justice. Her career was marked by countless high-profile cases, late nights spent poring over evidence, and moments where her sharp instincts made all the difference. But now, away from the pressures of her badge and title, she wanted nothing more than to enjoy a peaceful day browsing the shops. She wandered slowly, occasionally stopping to glance at window displays showcasing designer clothes, jewelry, and handbags. As she strolled past a luxury boutique known for its expensive accessories, Maya paused for a moment. A particular handbag caught her eye. It was sleek, stylish, and practical, exactly the kind of thing she could see herself using during business meetings. She leaned slightly closer to get a better look, admiring the craftsmanship without any intention of buying. For Maya, shopping was more about appreciating design than making impulsive purchases. Still, the act of looking felt indulgent after weeks of non-stop work. Unbeknownst to her, 2 security guards stationed near the entrance of the mall had started paying attention to her movements. One of them, a middle-aged man named Greg, nudged his partner Tom and tilted his head toward Maya. "See that woman over there?" he whispered, keeping his voice low so it wouldn't carry across the busy corridor. "She's been walking around for a while just staring into stores, but not actually going inside." Tom squinted, following Greg's gaze until he spotted Maya. "Yeah, I see her," he replied. "What about her?" Greg frowned, crossing his arms as he continued observing. "Something feels off. Look at how she's dressed. Doesn't really fit in here, does she? And why is she lingering outside these expensive places instead of actually shopping?" His tone suggested suspicion, though his reasoning was flimsy at best. Maya's casual outfit, a simple blouse, jeans, and sneakers, wasn't flashy or extravagant, but it certainly didn't scream criminal either. To anyone else, she might have looked like just another customer enjoying her weekend, but to Greg and Tom, her presence seemed suspicious enough to warrant closer scrutiny. Tom hesitated for a second, unsure if Greg's concerns were valid. After all, people came to malls for different reasons, to shop, to eat, even just to people watch. There was no law against standing near a store and admiring its merchandise. Still, Tom knew better than to question Greg too much. Both men had worked in mall security long enough to develop certain biases, whether they realized it or not. They often found themselves scrutinizing individuals who didn't match their mental image of typical shoppers. In this case, Maya's race and appearance played a subconscious role in triggering their suspicions. Without discussing it outright, both guards silently agreed that something about her behavior warranted further investigation. They began trailing her discreetly, weaving through the crowd while maintaining a safe distance. Every time Maya stopped to glance at a display or window, the guards exchanged knowing looks. When she lingered a little longer than expected near a rack of sunglasses, Greg muttered under his breath, "See? Definitely acting weird." Tom nodded, though doubt lingered in his mind. He couldn't quite articulate why, but something about the situation felt off, not because of Maya, but because of how quickly they'd jumped to conclusions. Still, he followed Greg's lead, unwilling to challenge him directly. For her part, Maya remained completely unaware of the growing tension behind her. She was lost in thought, mentally organizing tasks for the upcoming week and letting her mind wander. Occasionally, she smiled politely at passers-by, or stepped aside to let someone pass. Nothing about her actions suggested anything out of the ordinary, Yet as the minutes ticked by, the guards grew increasingly convinced that she was up to no good. Their suspicions weren't based on concrete evidence, but rather on vague impressions and unfounded assumptions. They failed to consider that Maya might simply be enjoying her day like everyone else around her. By the time Maya reached the next section of the mall, Greg and Tom had decided to confront her. They exchanged a quick nod, signaling their plan to approach her together. As they closed the distance between them and Maya, they straightened their posture, trying to appear authoritative despite the uncertainty gnawing at them. Little did they know their decision would soon lead to a confrontation far more complex and consequential than they ever anticipated. The stage was set for a clash of perceptions, biases, and truths. What started as an ordinary outing for Maya was about to take a dramatic turn, forcing everyone involved to confront uncomfortable realities about prejudice, judgment, and the weight of authority. For now, however, the unsuspecting detective simply continued her leisurely stroll, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing in her wake. As Maya stood near the display of handbags, her attention focused on the intricate details of a particular design. She suddenly felt a presence behind her. Turning slightly, she noticed two men in uniform, the mall's security guards, standing a few feet away. One of them stepped forward, his posture stiff and his expression stern. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, his voice carrying an edge of authority that seemed out of place in the otherwise relaxed atmosphere of the mall. "We need to speak with you about something." Maya blinked, caught off guard by the interruption. She glanced at the handbag again briefly, before turning fully to face the guards. Her calm demeanor masked the flicker of unease she felt. "Yes? What is it?" she asked politely, her tone measured but curious. The second guard, who had been hanging back slightly, now moved closer, his arms crossed as if trying to appear more imposing. Their body language was unmistakable. They weren't here for a casual chat. The first guard cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable but determined to press on. "We've received reports of someone acting suspiciously in this area," he began, his eyes narrowing slightly as he looked at Maya. "And we believe that person may be you." His words hung in the air, sharp and accusatory, cutting through the hum of conversation and laughter around them. Shoppers passing by slowed their steps, some glancing curiously at the unfolding scene while others continued on without paying much attention. Maya raised an eyebrow, her confusion giving way to irritation. Suspicious behavior? She hadn't done anything remotely unusual, just admired a few displays like countless other shoppers. Still, she kept her composure, knowing that reacting emotionally wouldn't help the situation. "I'm sorry, but I don't understand what you mean," she replied evenly, tilting her head slightly. "What exactly am I supposed to have done?" The second guard chimed in, his tone firmer than his partner's. "You've been walking around these stores for a while now, looking into them but not actually going inside or buying anything. That kind of behavior raises questions." He gestured vaguely toward the boutique behind her, as if to emphasize his point. Maya followed his gesture with her eyes, then turned back to him, her expression unreadable. "That's your reasoning?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. "I can't look at things without being accused of something?" She folded her arms across her chest, mirroring their defensive stance. "People come to malls to window shop all the time. It's hardly illegal." The guards exchanged a glance, their confidence wavering for just a moment. But Greg, the first guard, quickly recovered, his tone hardening further. "It's not just about looking," he insisted, his voice rising slightly. "There are patterns of behavior that suggest intent. And based on what we've observed, we think it's best if we check your belongings." He reached out as if expecting her to hand over her purse voluntarily. Maya took a step back instinctively, her irritation spiking. This wasn't just intrusive, it was baseless. She hadn't given them any reason to suspect her of wrongdoing, yet they were treating her like a criminal. "Check my belongings?" she repeated, her voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath the surface. "On what grounds? You're accusing me of stealing without any evidence whatsoever." Tom, the quieter of the two guards, shifted uncomfortably. Unlike Greg, who seemed determined to assert dominance, Tom appeared less certain about how to proceed. He opened his mouth as if to interject, but Greg cut him off. "Ma'am, this is standard procedure when someone exhibits suspicious behavior," he said firmly, though his lack of direct eye contact betrayed his growing discomfort. "If you cooperate, we can resolve this quickly and move on." Maya stared at him, incredulous. Standard procedure? To accuse someone of theft based solely on vague observations and assumptions? She could feel the weight of judgment pressing down on her, not just from the guards, but from the small group of onlookers who had gathered nearby. Some watched silently, while others whispered among themselves, speculating about what might be happening. A young mother holding her child's hand shot Maya a sympathetic glance, while a teenage boy smirked, clearly entertained by the drama unfolding before him. Despite the mounting pressure, Maya refused to let herself be intimidated. She straightened, her posture standing taller as if to reclaim some of the power they were attempting to strip away. "Let me make one thing very clear," she said, her voice low but firm. "I haven't stolen anything. I haven't done anything wrong. And I won't allow you to treat me like a suspect because of where I choose to stand or what I choose to look at." Greg bristled at her defiance, his face reddening slightly. "Ma'am, if you refuse to cooperate, we'll have no choice but to escalate this matter," he warned, his tone laced with thinly veiled frustration. "Do you really want to cause a scene here in front of everyone?" For a brief moment, Maya considered calling their bluff. Escalating the situation would mean involving the police, which might draw even more attention to the ordeal. But deep down, she knew that wasn't the solution. This wasn't about creating chaos. It was about exposing the flawed logic behind their accusations. Still, she couldn't ignore the sinking feeling in her stomach. This wasn't the first time she'd faced this kind of prejudice, but each encounter left its mark, chipping away at her patience and trust in systems meant to protect people like her. She sighed, choosing her next words carefully. "Fine," she said finally, her voice clipped. "If it'll prove to you that I'm not guilty of whatever crime you've imagined, then go ahead. Check my bag." As she spoke, she slid the strap of her purse off her shoulder and held it out toward them, her movements deliberate and controlled. The act felt demeaning, like she was surrendering a piece of her dignity, but she knew it was necessary to defuse the situation. The guards hesitated for a split second, perhaps surprised by her compliance. Then Greg reached out to take the bag, his fingers brushing against hers as he accepted it. Maya forced herself to remain still, resisting the urge to snatch it back. Watching them rifle through her personal belongings made her skin crawl. They pulled out her wallet, checked the contents, and examined her phone case as if searching for hidden contraband. Each item they handled felt like another layer of invasion, another reminder of how easily assumptions could spiral into accusations. Meanwhile, the crowd continued to grow. More shoppers had stopped to watch, some whispering behind cupped hands, others filming the interaction on their phones. Maya tried to block out the noise, focusing instead on maintaining her composure. She reminded herself that this wasn't about her. It was about the broader issue of racial profiling and bias, forces that had shaped too many lives in ways both subtle and overt. Still, it didn't make the experience any less maddening. When the guards finally finished inspecting her bag and found nothing incriminating, they exchanged another uneasy glance. For a moment, it seemed like they might apologize or admit their mistake. Instead, Greg handed the purse back to Maya with a gruff "thank you for your cooperation," as if she'd been the one causing trouble all along. Maya took the bag wordlessly, slipping it back over her shoulder. Her silence spoke volumes, a quiet rebuke to the injustice she'd just endured. But the confrontation wasn't over yet. As the guards prepared to walk away, likely eager to put the awkward encounter behind them, Maya decided to remind them and everyone watching of the gravity of their actions. With a steely gaze, she said, "Before you accuse someone again, maybe take a moment to consider why you're singling them out. Because misplaced suspicion has consequences." Her words lingered in the air, sharp and unyielding, leaving the guards visibly shaken. And though they didn't respond, Maya knew she'd planted a seed, one that might force them to reflect on their biases long after the day was done. The tension in the air was palpable as Maya stood there, her purse slung back over her shoulder. The two security guards, Greg and Tom, had just finished rifling through her belongings, finding absolutely nothing incriminating. Their faces were a mix of relief and unease, though neither man dared to meet her gaze directly. Maya's calm exterior masked the storm of emotions brewing inside her: frustration, anger, and a deep sense of injustice. She knew this moment wasn't just about her. It was symbolic of a much larger issue that countless others had faced before her. As Greg handed her purse back with an awkward nod, Maya decided it was time to reveal something they hadn't anticipated. She reached into her bag again, not to pull out another item for inspection, but to retrieve something far more significant. Her fingers closed around the sleek leather case that held her credentials. With deliberate care, she extracted the badge and held it up between them, allowing the light from the skylights above to catch its metallic surface. The golden emblem of the U.S. Department of Justice gleamed brightly, unmistakable even to the untrained eye. "This," Maya said firmly, her voice cutting through the murmurs of the growing crowd, "is who I am." For a split second, there was silence. Then both guards froze, their eyes widening in shock as they processed what they were seeing. Greg's jaw dropped slightly, while Tom visibly recoiled, his face turning pale. They exchanged a glance, panic flashing across their expressions. It was clear they hadn't expected this turn of events. In their minds, Maya had been nothing more than a suspicious shopper, a potential thief. Now they realized they'd just accused a federal law enforcement officer of shoplifting. "Oh no," Greg muttered under his breath, his earlier bravado evaporating completely. His hands twitched nervously at his sides as he struggled to find words. "Ma'am, we didn't know." Tom, still reeling from the revelation, stammered, "We're so sorry. We had no idea that you're a detective with the DOJ." Maya finished for him, her tone sharp, but controlled. She let the weight of her title sink in, watching as the reality of their mistake dawned on them. "Do you think that changes things? Because if you'd taken a moment to consider my innocence instead of jumping to conclusions, maybe you wouldn't be standing here right now trying to explain yourselves." Her words hung heavily in the air, punctuated by the murmurs of the onlookers. By now the crowd had grown significantly, drawn by the spectacle of a confrontation involving mall security. Some people craned their necks to get a better view, while others whispered among themselves, speculating about what was happening. A few even pulled out their phones to record the scene, capturing every word and gesture. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation, as though everyone present could sense that this moment carried deeper implications. Greg, clearly flustered, turned to Tom and whispered urgently, "Call management, we need backup. This is bad." Tom nodded quickly, pulling out his radio and speaking into it in hushed tones. Meanwhile, Greg attempted to salvage the situation, his voice trembling as he addressed Maya. "Detective Richardson, please understand. We were only doing our jobs. If we'd known who you were, none of this would have happened." Maya arched, an eyebrow, her expression unreadable. "You mean if you'd known I was someone with authority, you wouldn't have treated me this way?" she asked pointedly. "But isn't that the problem? You judged me based on how I look, not on who I am. And when you made those assumptions, you crossed a line." Her words struck a nerve, not just with the guards but with the bystanders as well. Several members of the crowd nodded in agreement, their expressions reflecting a mixture of sympathy and outrage. One woman, clutching a shopping bag filled with clothes, stepped forward hesitantly. "Excuse me," she said softly, addressing the guards. "I saw her earlier. She was just browsing like anyone else. There was nothing suspicious about her behavior." Another man chimed in, his voice firmer. "Yeah, accusing someone without evidence is unacceptable. This kind of thing happens too often, and it needs to stop." The comments rippled through the crowd, amplifying Maya's point. For once, she wasn't alone in calling out the injustice. Strangers were rallying around her, lending their voices to the cause. Despite the support, Maya remained focused on the guards. She could see the fear in their eyes, the realization that their actions might have serious repercussions. They weren't just dealing with an irate shopper anymore. They were facing a representative of federal law enforcement, someone whose job it was to uphold justice and accountability. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, least of all Maya herself. "Let me make one thing very clear," she continued, her voice steady and commanding. "This isn't about me personally. It's about the fact that your assumptions led you to accuse an innocent person of a crime. What if I hadn't been carrying this badge? Would you have dragged me into an office or called the police? Would you have subjected me to further humiliation because of the color of my skin?" The question hit like a punch, leaving the guards speechless. Greg opened his mouth to respond, but found himself unable to form coherent words. Instead, he looked down at his shoes, shame washing over him. Tom, meanwhile, fidgeted nervously with his radio, avoiding eye contact altogether. Both men seemed acutely aware of the gravity of their mistake, and the audience witnessing it unfold. Maya pressed on, her voice rising slightly to ensure everyone within earshot could hear. "People like me, black women, are disproportionately targeted in situations like this. We're followed in stores, questioned for no reason, and treated as guilty until proven otherwise. It's exhausting, and it's wrong. But today you've given me an opportunity to shine a light on this issue, so thank you for reminding me why the work I do matters." Her final statement was met with applause from the crowd. Several people clapped enthusiastically, while others nodded in agreement. Even some of the mall employees who had gathered nearby joined in, recognizing the truth in her words. For a brief moment, the bustling corridor transformed into a space of solidarity, where strangers united in acknowledging the harm caused by prejudice and bias. The guards, however, looked as though they wished the ground would swallow them whole. Greg finally managed to speak, his voice barely above a whisper. "Detective, we truly are sorry. Please believe us, we never meant for this to happen." He glanced at Tom, who nodded vigorously in agreement. "We'll do whatever it takes to make this right." Maya studied them for a long moment, weighing their sincerity against the damage already done. While part of her wanted to dismiss their apology outright, she knew that wasn't productive. Instead, she chose to use the moment as a teaching opportunity, one that might prevent similar incidents in the future. "Apologies are a start," she said after a pause, her tone softening slightly. "But actions speak louder than words. If you're serious about making this right, then commit to educating yourselves and your colleagues about racial profiling. Learn to recognize your biases and challenge them before they lead to situations like this. Because trust me, I won't be the last person to experience this kind of treatment." Her words resonated deeply, not just with the guards, but with everyone listening. The crowd erupted into applause again, this time louder and more sustained. People began dispersing slowly, many stopping to shake Maya's hand or offer words of encouragement. Some promised to share videos of the incident online, hoping to spark broader conversations about systemic discrimination. Others vowed to support businesses that prioritized inclusivity and fairness. As the commotion began to die down, Maya took a step back, allowing herself a moment to process everything that had transpired. Though the confrontation had been stressful, she felt a sense of vindication knowing that her identity had forced the guards to confront their biases. Still, she couldn't help but wonder how many others had endured similar experiences without the privilege of a badge to shield them. For Greg and Tom, the ordeal was far from over. Mall management arrived shortly afterward, accompanied by senior security personnel eager to contain the fallout. They apologized profusely to Maya, promising to review their policies and implement training programs to address implicit bias. But Maya knew that promises alone wouldn't erase the harm caused by their actions, or the countless other instances of racial profiling that occurred daily across the country. As she walked away from the scene, her head held high, Maya felt a renewed determination to continue fighting for justice, not just in her professional capacity, but as a voice for those who had been silenced. Today's encounter was a stark reminder of the work that still needed to be done, and she was ready to lead the charge. The aftermath of the confrontation rippled through Willow Creek Mall like a shockwave, leaving everyone involved scrambling to make sense of what had just happened. For Greg and Tom, the two security guards at the center of the debacle, panic set in almost immediately. As Maya walked away, her head held high and her badge tucked securely back into her purse, they exchanged frantic glances, their faces pale with dread. The realization that they had accused a federal officer of shoplifting and subjected her to public humiliation was sinking in with devastating clarity. Greg frantically grabbed his radio again, speaking in hushed tones as he tried to explain the situation to their supervisor without sounding completely incompetent. "We've got a problem," he whispered urgently, pacing back and forth near the boutique where the confrontation had taken place. "A big problem." On the other end of the line, their manager's voice crackled through the device demanding details. Greg hesitated, clearly struggling to find the right words. "How do you admit to something so monumentally embarrassing?" Finally, he blurted out, It's about one of the shoppers. Turns out she's a detective with the DOJ." There was a long pause on the other end before their supervisor responded, his tone sharp and incredulous. "You're telling me you accused a federal law enforcement official of stealing? Are you serious?" "Yes, sir," Greg replied, his voice trembling. "We didn't know who she was at first. She wasn't acting suspiciously, or at least not enough to justify what we did. But now—" He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. The weight of their mistake hung heavily between them. Meanwhile, Tom stood frozen, his hands gripping the railing near the escalator. His mind raced with thoughts of potential consequences. Would they be fired? Sued? Arrested? The possibilities swirled in his head like a storm, each scenario worse than the last. He glanced around nervously, noticing that some of the bystanders were still filming or snapping photos. Social media would eat this up, he thought grimly. By tomorrow morning, their faces might be plastered all over local news outlets, accompanied by headlines questioning their competence and their judgment. Their fears weren't unfounded. Within minutes, mall management arrived on the scene, led by Mr. Caldwell, the head of operations for Willow Creek Mall. A tall, impeccably dressed man in his late 50s, Caldwell exuded authority, but also carried an air of barely concealed annoyance. Flanked by two senior security personnel, he approached Greg and Tom with a stern expression. "What exactly is going on here?" he demanded, his voice low but firm. "I'm getting reports of a major incident involving our staff. Care to explain?" Greg gulped audibly, while Tom shifted uncomfortably under Caldwell's piercing gaze. Neither of them wanted to deliver the bad news, but someone had to speak up. After a tense moment, Greg stepped forward, his shoulders slumped in. Defeat. "Sir, we made a terrible mistake," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. We suspected a shopper of acting suspiciously, so we confronted her. But when we asked to search her belongings, she showed us her badge. She's a detective with the DOJ. Caldwell's eyes widened in disbelief, his perfectly composed demeanor cracking ever so slightly. "Are you telling me you profiled and harassed a federal officer?" he asked, his tone rising with each word. "Do you have any idea how much trouble this could bring to this mall, and to all of us personally?" Tom chimed in, his voice shaky, but desperate. "We didn't mean to cause a scene, sir, honest. It was just, we thought we were doing our jobs. We didn't know who she was until it was too late." Caldwell sighed deeply, pinching the bridge of his nose as if trying to ward off an impending headache. "This isn't just about doing your jobs," he said sharply. "This is about professionalism, discretion, and treating every single person who walks through these doors with respect. You can't go around accusing people based on assumptions. Not only is it unethical, but it's also bad for business. Do you realize how many witnesses there were? Videos are probably already online as we speak." Sure enough, Caldwell's prediction proved accurate. Within hours, snippets of the confrontation began circulating on social media platforms. One video, captured by a shopper who had been standing nearby, quickly went viral. The clip showed Maya holding up her badge, her calm yet commanding presence contrasting sharply with the visibly shaken guards. Comments poured in from viewers across the country, many expressing outrage over the blatant racial profiling. Others praised Maya for handling the situation with dignity and grace, calling her a role model for standing up against injustice. Back at the mall, Caldwell wasted no time addressing the fallout. He called an emergency meeting with his team, including Greg and Tom, to discuss damage control. First things first, he announced, pacing in front of the group. We need to issue a formal apology to Detective Richardson and to the public. This kind of behavior is unacceptable and we must take responsibility for it. Secondly, I want mandatory sensitivity training implemented for every employee, starting immediately. No exceptions. As Caldwell laid out his plan, Greg and Tom exchanged guilty looks. They knew they'd dodged a bullet, for now. While they wouldn't lose their jobs outright, they'd likely face disciplinary action, along with close supervision, moving forward. More importantly, they understood that their actions had tarnished the mall's reputation and highlighted systemic issues that couldn't be ignored. In the days that followed, the story gained even more traction. Local news stations picked up on the viral videos, interviewing shoppers who had witnessed the incident firsthand. Many described Maya as poised and dignified, while others criticized the guards for their lack of professionalism. One woman, who had recorded part of the exchange, told reporters, "It was heartbreaking to see someone treated that way simply because of how they looked. But it was also inspiring to watch her stand up for herself and turn the moment into a lesson for everyone." Maya, for her part, remained focused on using the experience to drive meaningful change. When contacted by journalists eager to hear her side of the story, she agreed to speak publicly, but only on her terms. In a series of interviews, she emphasized the broader implications of racial profiling, sharing personal anecdotes about similar encounters she'd faced throughout her life. Her message was clear. This wasn't just about her. It was about dismantling the biases that perpetuated such injustices. Her words resonated deeply with audiences, sparking widespread discussions about systemic discrimination and accountability. Activists praised her for turning a painful moment into an opportunity for education, while community leaders called for reforms in retail and security practices. Even lawmakers weighed in, urging businesses to adopt stricter anti-profiling policies. For Greg and Tom, the incident became a wake-up call they couldn't ignore. During the sensitivity training sessions mandated by Caldwell, they listened intently, as experts explained the impact of implicit bias and stereotyping. At first they felt defensive, convinced they hadn't meant to harm anyone. But as they heard stories from colleagues and trainers about the real-world consequences of racial profiling, their perspectives began to shift. By the end of the program, both men admitted they needed to reevaluate their approach to security work and their assumptions about people. Still, Maya refused to let the matter rest entirely. She filed a formal complaint with the local police department overseeing mall security, ensuring that the guards' actions would be reviewed independently. Though she stopped short of pursuing legal action, she made it clear that incidents like this couldn't be swept under the rug. Accountability, she believed, was key to preventing future occurrences. As the dust settled, the ripple effects of the confrontation continued to spread. Shoppers reported feeling safer and more respected at Willow Creek Mall, thanks in part to the new initiatives introduced by management. Employees underwent regular training sessions, learning to prioritize fairness and empathy in their interactions. And Maya, returning to her duties at the DOJ, carried the memory of that day with her, a reminder of why her fight for justice mattered more than ever. Though the ordeal had been exhausting, Maya found solace in knowing that her voice had sparked change. The world was far from perfect, but moments like these offered hope, a testament to the power of resilience, courage, and unwavering determination. Maya regarded her calmly, her arms crossed over her chest. She didn't shake the offered hand immediately, but instead held Linda's gaze, letting the weight of the moment settle between them. The senior manager's polished demeanor faltered, slightly under Maya's steady stare, her smile becoming more forced as she waited for a response. Finally, after what felt like an eternity to the growing crowd of onlookers, Maya extended her hand and gave it a firm, brief shake. "Thank you for the apology," she said evenly, her tone measured but unyielding. But I think we both know that words aren't enough. Linda nodded quickly, beads of sweat forming at her temples despite the air-conditioned mall interior. Of course, she replied, her voice rushed and tinged with desperation. We're committed to making this right, not just with you, Detective Richardson, but with all of our patrons. This kind of behavior is unacceptable, and we will take immediate steps to ensure it doesn't happen again. Behind her, the head of security and the corporate representative exchanged uneasy glances, clearly aware that the fallout from this incident could damage the mall's reputation if not handled carefully. Maya tilted her head slightly, studying Linda's face for any hint of insincerity. I appreciate the sentiment, she said finally, but actions matter more than promises. What exactly are you planning to do about this? Because if nothing changes, then this apology means very little. The directness of her question caught Linda off guard, and she hesitated before responding. Well, we'll be conducting mandatory sensitivity training for all staff members starting next week, she stammered, glancing briefly at the guards for emphasis. And we'll review our policies to make sure incidents like this don't occur in the future. We're also considering hiring a diversity consultant to help us address these issues systematically. Maya raised an eyebrow, her expression skeptical, but not entirely dismissive. That sounds like a start, she admitted, but let me be clear. Training sessions and consultants won't fix deeply ingrained biases overnight. It's going to take consistent effort and accountability if you truly want to create a welcoming environment for everyone who comes here. Her words resonated with the crowd, many of whom nodded in agreement. One woman standing nearby called out, "She's right. You can't just sweep this under the rug and hope people forget about it." Others chimed in, their voices rising in support of Maya's stance. For a moment, it seemed as though the entire mall had united against the management team, demanding real change rather than empty platitudes. Realizing they were losing control of the situation, Linda turned to Greg and Tom, her frustration evident. "You two need to file a full report on this incident immediately," she instructed sharply. "And expect disciplinary action. We can't afford mistakes like this." Both guards flinched visibly at her words, their earlier bravado completely gone. They exchanged guilty looks, knowing their careers were now hanging by a thread. Satisfied that the immediate crisis was being addressed, Maya stepped back, allowing the managers and security personnel to huddle together and discuss next steps. But she wasn't done yet. Turning to the crowd, she raised her voice so everyone within earshot could hear. "Thank you all for your support today," she began, her tone warm but resolute. "This isn't just about me. It's about every person who has ever been treated unfairly because of how they look or where they come from. Racism and bias exist everywhere, and they thrive when we stay silent. So please keep speaking up. Keep holding institutions accountable. That's how we create real change." Her speech earned another round of applause, louder and more enthusiastic than before. Several people approached her afterward, offering heartfelt thanks and sharing their own stories of discrimination. A young college student told Maya about being followed around a grocery store simply because he was wearing a hoodie. An elderly woman recounted how she had been refused service at a restaurant decades ago because of her ethnicity. Each story added fuel to Maya's determination to use her platform for advocacy. By the time she left the mall, news of the incident had already begun circulating online. Videos of the confrontation, recorded by bystanders, went viral within hours, sparking heated discussions across social media platforms. Many praised Maya for handling the situation with grace and professionalism, while others criticized the guards and mall management for their blatant profiling. Local news outlets picked up the story, interviewing shoppers who had witnessed the event and inviting experts to weigh in on racial profiling in retail spaces. Days later, back at the DOJ office, Maya found herself recounting the ordeal to her colleagues during a lunch break. Her co-workers listened intently, their expressions shifting from outrage to admiration as she described the events step by step. "I'm proud of how you handled it," one of her teammates said earnestly. Not everyone would have kept their cool in that situation. Maya smiled faintly, appreciating the support but focusing instead on the bigger picture. It wasn't just about keeping my cool, she explained. It was about turning a bad experience into an opportunity to educate people. If even one person walks away from this incident thinking twice about their assumptions, then it was worth it. True to their word, mall management implemented sweeping changes in the weeks that followed. Sensitivity training sessions became mandatory for all employees, and a hotline was established for customers to report instances of discrimination or mistreatment. Posters promoting inclusivity and respect appeared throughout the mall, serving as constant reminders of the institution's renewed commitment to fairness. While some critics argued that these measures were merely performative, others acknowledged that meaningful progress often started with small steps. For Maya, the incident reinforced her belief in the importance of perseverance and representation. She continued giving interviews to local media outlets, using her platform to amplify marginalized voices and advocate for systemic reform. Her story resonated with countless individuals who had faced similar injustices, inspiring them to speak out and demand better treatment. Though the experience left its mark, both emotionally and mentally, Maya emerged stronger and more determined than ever. She knew the fight against prejudice wouldn't end anytime soon, but she also knew she wasn't alone. With each new challenge, she reminded herself of the power of resilience, education, and collective action. And as she walked through the halls of the DOJ building, badge gleaming proudly on her hip, Maya carried with her the knowledge that she was not just fighting for justice professionally, but personally, too.